Hello everyone, Neil Malherbe here at ACSI House, and I'm really excited to share a couple of podcasts, recordings with you as an encouragement to our ACSI leaders in schools across the country. I'm sitting here today with a very special guest who's traveled all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, and who will be speaking at our upcoming National Principals Conference. And we just thought that it would be a great encouragement to continue a conversation beyond that conference as an encouragement to our leaders. So Scott Barron has traveled all the way across from America. We've just enjoyed some time of safari out in the African bush. He's sitting here with me in my office enjoying a cup of rooibos tea, having been introduced to it over the last couple of days, and with some good fynbos honey in it. And so I'm hoping that that is really going to lubricate exactly what he has to share with us today. So Scott, welcome to South Africa. Welcome to ACSI House.
Thank you so much. And I love the tea, love the safari, and just the hospitality of everyone here. It's been fantastic.
Good. We have just spent a bit of time, Tom and Scott and Tammy, sitting around enjoying a meal with the rest of the ACSI team. And in the conversation, we were speaking about some of the challenges that our principals face in South Africa, one of which is an economic challenge of, particularly in those schools that are low fee or no fee schools, and perhaps a mind shift that needs to take place either in the funding model, but more in the approach, not seeing ourselves out of a poverty mindset. And that really struck home for me, because I think that many of our principals are in exactly that position, that it's a kind of survival day by day. So, Scott, maybe I'll throw it over to you and just share a little bit about what's on your heart in terms of those sort of schools.
Well, thank you, Neil. And thank you all as well just for what you do in Christian school leadership, because you impact a lot of people that some you realize now and some you won't know until eternity. And so we do very much admire what you do and appreciate your dedication to the craft of being school leaders. It is something that we've bumped into a lot in working with Christian schools around the world, is that they're often, what creeps into the culture, the leadership culture, is that there kind of becomes an acceptance of, well, that's just the way it is, right? And part of becoming excellent, which means that we're not just excellent because we self-proclaim it, but we've really differentiated ourselves from the other options that are available in the market, where we actually are excellent not only compared to where maybe that we were before. It's not just against us, but it's against the other schools that are in our market. Are we distinctive in what we do? And of course, it can be reasonably said that if we're going to put Jesus's name on this, it ought to be good. That'll be really good, right? Because that's a bold move, right? So part of our challenge to Christian school educators is there are some things that we say, well, it's good enough, but it really shouldn't be good enough, right? I mean, there ought to be a discomfort with some of the things that we begin to accept as status quo. And until we get uncomfortable with that, we're probably not going to have excellent schools. And that's part of what we have been trying to do as a part of our ministry to educators, and particularly Christian school educators, is to say, yeah, but are we in the situation we are because we have no choice, or are we in the situation we are because we made a choice? And most of the time, it's the latter. We have options. And the reason we say that is because we know that there are schools, for example, that serve very high poverty populations who actually pay their teachers quite well. And because they built a underlying economic model that enabled that to be true, but they asked different questions. So I think that's the thing to think about, Neil, is as we look to maybe change the model, is we need Christian school leaders who are starting to reconsider the questions. Sometimes our questions are, well, how do we survive? How do we just get to the next payroll, or how do we get to the next year, right? But that's a defensive mode. And typically there's less joy in that work because now life is happening to you instead of you happening to life, right? And there's going to be conflict in schools. There's going to be stuff that comes up, and we're going to have to, and it gets really hard, right? And a lot of people, they kind of shut down when that begins to happen, like as if it's supposed to be this peaceful experience, which we know just isn't true.
Yeah.
So as we move into thinking about, one of the challenges that we want our school leaders to be thinking about here in South Africa is we're halfway through the school year. Right? Are we on track to win? Right? I mean, are we asked? Have you defined your vision enough that economically we know we're on the right track? We know that we are going to not just be in that survival mode, but whether we have to restructure how we do our schedule, because time is typically the most expensive part of the school, right? And the way that our current economic model is designed is based on how we use time in the class schedule, the master schedule, right? You know, master schedules didn't exist until the earliest part of the 20th century. We didn't have that. And it becomes a big inhibitor to innovation in schools because we get locked into certain ways of doing things. So what if we ask better questions? What are the right questions? What are the questions that we should be considering, for example, as we design our school? How do we design a school that's actually designed for the health and well-being of educators versus what's efficient and what's best for kids? Because most of the time our schedules are totally based on a student-centered model that we know from ample research doesn't actually work. That schools designed around educators, around designing the best environment for educators to thrive and enabling them to practice their craft with authenticity and with energy, that actually produces the best results. But most of our Christian schools are designed on a model that actually came out of the 1970s, even 60s. And in this new economic sort of region that we're moving into now, we get a chance to rethink things. Schools overall are going to be able to reinvent themselves, and just like during COVID, a lot of schools did during that time, and so most of them went back to the 2019 version of them. They didn't really innovate through it.
Yes.
Well, what's happening going forward now is an opportunity to really reconsider the model. I mean, when you look at different instructional pathways, artificial intelligence, blended learning, differentiated learning, there's a lot of things that we know that allows for maximum motivation and opportunity for students and educators that also moves the economic model, right? So we get to ask better questions. When I say better questions, one of the questions that we've landed on with school growth is, what if we ask the question this way, rather than asking, well, how do we keep doing more with less, right? What if the question becomes, how could we thoroughly redesign our school to teach students instead of classes? Well, I mean, because what's implied in that is most of what we do is around teaching a curriculum that is somehow separated into first, second, third, fourth grade, first period, second period, third period, fourth period, which we know those are constructs we've made up. They don't actually exist. There is no first, second, third grade, and every student progresses at their own pace. They all have different interests. They have different aptitudes. Right? So autonomy is a very important ingredient for maximizing motivation and learning. And we do everything we can to minimize autonomy for students in Christian schools. We do the same thing for educators. We actually create some of the worst conditions for motivation, and we wonder why we're burning our people out. If you want to love and lead educators, figure out how to give them greater autonomy, still within the constraints of accountability, but allowing them the opportunity to make decisions about how they use time, how they prioritize, instead of mapping everything out for the year and say, hey, good luck, here's your box, right? So I think that's a big part of this is change your questions, and you'll start to open up doors that you didn't even know were there.
Yes. Thanks, Scott. You mentioned while we were chatting earlier, and feel free to have your sip of Robos. A little bit earlier when we were chatting, Scott mentioned how, in particular in a school which is facing financial constraints or is in a difficult place, that in coping day to day, the dreams of the leaders diminish the dreams of the kids. And in a school environment, we should be creating an environment. Do you want to talk a little bit into that about dreams?
For sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. One of the things that we sometimes fall into the trap of is that we sometimes in schools become dispensers of curriculum instead of enablers of dreams. And that's just saying it that way, it shifts your perspective on what a school is. If we see our school as being an enabler of dreams, then how do we design our school off of that? Well, first and foremost, we need education leaders who have visions, who have dreams. The Bible is very clear that a leader has to know where they're going. Now, sometimes God shows up and he says, hey, I want you to go that direction. Maybe it's a burning bush, maybe it's a light on the road, right? But there are times when God intercedes and says, I've got a plan for you, let's go this direction. Otherwise, he trusts leaders. God accomplishes his plans through leaders. And not just people who have positional authority, but actually bring an ability to lead people forward. And leading people forward means sometimes we have to convince them that, hey, this is the right direction to go. And educators particularly have a little bit more of a resistance to change, right? So to be an education leader is to be a shepherd of people who do have an inclination to kind of stay put, right? To resist and go with what we know, right? But as I shared in the weekly encouragement this week, it's hard to say you have a growth mindset if you have the same habits, the same mentors, the same lesson plans, the same practices. That's not a growth mindset, right? The growth mindset allows us to adapt to the needs of our students. It allows us to adapt to the needs of our community. It allows us to adapt to opportunities created in the market, right? So I think part of the drive here is we have to have school leaders, principals, heads who have a vision. What do you want? And I've asked that question of a lot of school heads, and so often that the response is very vague. It's sort of these platitudes of sort of grandeur, but I'm not asking you for this big sort of restatement of Christian education. I'm asking you at your school, where you are in this year, where are you going? When you get to the end of this year, how will you know you've won?
Yes.
Based on what? And do we have agreement on that? Will your people agree, and will we have celebrated milestones throughout the year that we know we've won? Right? And that's one of the things we know, that there's a best practice in high functioning organizations is they have subsets of time. So we have a whole school year, and sometimes we see schools trying to maybe innovate a little bit, but if they do, it's more in annual cycles or even accreditation year to accreditation year, right? Sometimes there's a long gap. Meanwhile, every business, every organization out here in our community is innovating how fast? At least quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, right? So schools kind of get left out of the equation when our cycle of learning and growth is so long, right? So part of that dreaming is hey, let's figure out where we want to go, and then let's start developing habits, right? Because that's the difference between excellence is not the result of goals; it is always a result of habits. So what if we shift our habits to where we're starting to do like you do here at the office, here at the ACSI house, is hey, we have regular check-ins. We know what we're responsible for in our different areas. So in a school, our different departments or divisions, we know what we're working on, and we report that back together. What that creates is synchronization, a syncopation, right? And an analogy of music. so often in our schools, they're playing jazz when they need to be playing symphony.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm playing jazz, I'm kind of riffing my own thing.
Yeah.
Right? Now, they do come together, good jazz musicians, but if I'm playing kind of on my own, well, I can go out here and I can kind of do my thing. But in a school, you can't do your thing.
Yes.
You're a part of us.
Yes.
We have one mission. We have one team. We have one set of objectives. Maybe, right?
Yeah.
But having a vision allows us to bring that together. We know what we're doing together. We're on the same page. We're on the same beat, and we're following the conductor. And this is why a conductor, when they're there, they've got a sheet, they've got the music, and everybody can follow. They know where this is going.
Yes.
They know what the culmination is, right? The problem with our schools is so often I don't even know where we're going.
Yeah.
I'm just here playing my instrument. I hope I'm in tune. I try to adjust everybody else. Sometimes I'm in tune, sometimes I'm not. I don't even know where we're playing that. No one even told me, right? So then we kind of get in our own silos and we're all playing our own thing, and there is no us. There's just a collection of individuals. And that typically doesn't turn out well when it comes to music.
Yes.
Right? And it doesn't come out well when we're talking about schools. So the best thing that we could see happening in our schools, we would see the best results if our leaders would take the time, take a day, take 2 days if you need it, go pray and fast if you need to, settle in your heart, where are we going? What are the end results from this year? What are the end results our principals need to be looking at 2027 now. Right? What happens when we get to next December 31st, 2027? How are we different? What's different curriculum-wise? What's different culture? What's different people, right? How does that all come together? Because those are the major variables that we control in school life, right? So articulate that. And there's a couple of exercises that we have recommended that school leaders can do to not only do that for themselves, but also with their team, so that they can articulate actually creating a newsletter or a website or whatever that says, hey, into that next year, these are the major articles and points that we want to have as a part of that story, right? Well, if you know what sort of your table of contents of your publication is going to be at the end of the year, well, now I can backwards engineer that and go, all right, let's make that true, right? Let's write the script, right? Listen, if you don't know what story you're writing, you're just a character in somebody else's story, right? And there's usually way less joy in that. So I think it's important that our leaders, come on, you're leading a Christian school, you're leading Christian educators who are making significant sacrifices for you, sometimes unnecessarily, but that's another conversation. But bring your vision. Yeah. Because if you can't bring the vision, you have no way to really lead. You're just managing. Leaders have to bring a vision. They have to build engagement. They have to know how to align the talents and resources. And then they have to produce results. Yes. That's what leaders do.
Brilliant. Scott, I'm going to end this first session and invite everybody to join us for the second webinar. And we just thought that these were really useful ways of throwing out a few ideas for our school leaders to be able to engage and perhaps be challenged by. And so please do join us for the second part of this conversation with Scott Barron, and that will be in webinar number 2.